Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending today's presentation on event-driven security. My name is Hunter Lynne, and I am an AWS Solutions Architect and Cloud Adoption Practice Leader at Onyx. I joined the organization about 7 months ago, and I'm responsible for creating products that help existing and new customers solve and navigate their information security, risk, and compliance challenges in the cloud. Prior to Onyx, I spent almost 20 years leading various security and risk management teams across multiple business divisions at Wells Fargo. Today's presentation is about event-driven security, which is an architecture model for automation based on activities that occur in your environment. Okay. The purpose of the discussion is to share information with you all about the approach and the mechanisms for planning, designing, and implementing event-driven security in your organization. And I hope at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll have enough information to recommend use cases at your company or to experiment with event-driven security in your test environments. And I need to turn on my camera here real quick. Let's see here. Sorry about that. Oh, okay, it's not able. All right. So, let's see here. So here's the agenda for today. I've broken the presentation into two parts. The first 3 bullet points are primarily foundational, and we're going to talk about the approach and strategy for considering event-driven security and best practices for risk management and security in your organization. And then the next 2 bullet points, the demos, I'm going to do about 3 demos, live demos. And then the event-driven architecture overview are the more technical pieces where we'll get into the specifics of the solution and how it works. And then I'm throwing in a little extra credit. There was a presenter earlier who did a nice job on some of the AWS certifications, but I'll just briefly talk about my process for the AWS Security Specialty Exam and some of the things that I read and the approach I took to pass that exam. Might be helpful to you guys. All right, so before embarking on any new security initiatives, you need to ask some basic questions to understand the threats, what it is you're protecting, why you're protecting it, and controls needed to protect the assets in your company. You need to understand control testing, and you need to understand how often that control testing should occur, okay? It's important that the security model you're implementing aligns with the risk in your organization. So here's an example of that. Say you have a bunch of EC2 instances in your environment, and they have EBS volumes attached to them, okay? And one subset of those EC2 instances has public information on them, and the other set of EC2 instances has confidential information. You're most likely not going to treat those the same in terms of the controls that you apply in your environment. You may implement encryption, for example, on the confidential information based on the business requirements, the threats your organization is facing, and maybe even regulatory requirements that require that you protect that information above and beyond, say, just normal storage of the data on an EBS volume. So look, you can have all the controls in the world, but if they're not aligned properly with the threats and risks in your company and the assets you're trying to protect, then you're gonna be wasting a lot of time, money, and resources. So it's really important that you ask these questions to get the right view of risk, okay? And then apply those controls to ensure you're implementing risk management best practices across your cloud environment. So now you're thinking, okay, I can ask these questions. What's event-driven security have to do with it? Well, event-driven security can be one of the controls that can help you manage security in your environment. But you really need to understand your business requirements, the policies, what your risk appetite is. You gotta get the answers to these questions, of course. And that usually helps formulate a business case, right? So you want to justify why you need to do these things, okay? And that's a really important step as you consider this tool, this process for protecting your environment. So one of the things I've observed at Onyx since working here during the last 7 months is that when I talk to customers, one of the first things I ask is, well, do you have a complete inventory of your assets? Or do you have like a data classification matrix? Do you understand the sensitivity levels of the data? Where is it stored in that inventory? And even though I've just been here a little bit of time, there's usually some puzzled looking faces I see when I ask that question. So really the first step as you embark on thinking about implementing risk-based security and maybe even this control that we're going to talk about today is really understanding what it is you have out there, okay? Making sure you have a full inventory of all the resources and services and assets, and then making sure you can apply some type of sensitivity classification to the data that's stored or resides or is used by those assets, okay? And that's really the first step, because that information then feeds into a risk assessment, okay? And the risk assessment's designed to, okay, look at everything based on, holistically. I have all these assets in my environment. I have all this data. It's classified as such. You're going to look for weaknesses, right? And you're going to probably look for weaknesses more on the sensitive information, right? The most important information that is residing or used in your organization, as opposed to things that may have a lower risk. So that risk assessment can help you understand where those weaknesses are, and then you can start targeting and prioritizing the remediation based on the outcome of that risk assessment. And the risk assessment is something I've done a lot at Onyx, and it's something if you need help with, at any point, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, okay? Okay, so once you understand the risk, you're going to want to reference or implement AWS security best practices depending on the problem you're trying to solve. All right, so these are based on the design principles here, which are found in the well-architected framework security pillar. And they're really key because they're going to help you build out your security program, infrastructure, and processes based on what Amazon knows to be the absolute best practices to operate securely in the cloud. So the first one is to implement strong identity foundation, okay? And when you think about that, you think about, when you first start you open up an AWS account, right? What does it start with? Well, you need a root account. So the first thing starts with access. And it really is the first line of defense. Access management is really key. I can't tell you how many times, both in this current position and in my previous role, where we acquired companies, where I'd go in and look at access management and shake my head, honestly, about what was happening. It's a real weakness out there because a lot of companies don't think about both the strategic and tactical aspects of managing access. And one of the weaknesses we see is that there's excessive access, both with regular entities and privileged entities, and that least privileged access is not implemented correctly for organizations. Segregation of duties is also not implemented correctly. So one of the things we recommend is, is to go back and kind of re-baseline, right, reset, and see about how we can implement something like role-based access controls that match entities in the organization and the types of things that they should have access to. And remember, that goes back to having a good asset inventory and understanding what type of data is out there and how sensitive that is, okay? So that's a really important first step, and it's one of the key design principles that AWS references for security. The second one's around enabling traceability. All right, so and the reason that's red and automating security best practices is red is that because we're going to use two of these design principles in the lab in a few minutes to build out the event-driven security that you'll see today. So these design principles play directly into the solution that we're going to implement. So historically, traceability, right, which means logging and monitoring, has been a detective control. With the cloud, we're able to change that now and monitor changes in real time, okay? And I'll talk about automating security best practices on the next slide, but with the cloud capabilities, we're able to say, okay, this is occurring right now, instead of waiting for a human to look at it or some other program to look at it days or weeks later, or even months later. Some of the capabilities now that are native to AWS are really helpful for identifying changes that are occurring, and then you can build processes around that will take action right away to solve your security problem. The next one's applying security to layers, which translates into a defense in depth approach. Okay. So if you think about, you have edge security, like a web application firewall, you may have network ACLs, you may have security groups, you may have OS security, and then you may have application level security. It's really important to have it's really important to have a balanced, holistic security model that can help you achieve security across your entire infrastructure and not just at a certain point in that infrastructure. So it's obviously a best practice to implement defense in depth where you can. And I'll talk about automating security best practices on the next slide. And then protecting data in transit and at rest. I've kind of spoken to that already. And that's around, say, those EBS volumes on the EC2 instances, right? If you have sensitive information, you want to use mechanisms such as encryption to protect that. And then keeping people away from data is about reducing direct access or the manual processing of data. And this is going to just overall reduce the risk of loss or accidental modification. And then lastly, another weakness we see a lot in our work is teams really aren't prepared for security events in most cases, okay? And what that means is you need to have a tested, validated process for dealing with security issues as they come up. You want to have a clean root cause analysis. You want to have a clean room. You want to know who should be on the call. You should have a playbook. All these things should be part of a practice that you've put together that you can refer to if things get kind of dicey in your environment. You don't want to be pulling everybody together and trying to figure out what to do when this goes down. You want to make sure that you have a plan in place when things go a little bit wrong, okay? All right, so automation is one of the key aspects of the cloud, really. It's what affords all the agility we talk about and desire from the cloud. But with the security, and in particular event-driven security, it's one of the key factors, right? And what automation allows us to do is to scale rapidly and more cost effectively, okay? And why can we do that? How do we do that? We do it with code, right? Infrastructure is code. That's the game changer. That's a differentiator between what we have, typically on-prem and some of the legacy ways of running our technology versus, going full cloud infrastructure as code. And what this does is it allows us to shift from detective to preventive control models, right? That allows us to remediate problems proactively. And we'll see some of that in the demo that's coming up. So now we're getting to the technical phase, right? We got through the first 3 bullet points on the agenda. And this event-driven architecture overview is to, kind of explain what the pieces and parts are that make it work, all right? So we're going to identify something that's going to change in our environment, and we're going to trigger something else that's going to go solve that problem or give us a notification. Or, when you guys start testing this in your labs, it can do almost anything you want, all right? But there are 3 components to it, all right? There's a publisher, a filter, and an in-service function. So an example I'm gonna show you in a minute, the use case is we want to be notified when a user is created in AWS, okay? So the publisher is going to be CloudTrail. IAM is going to write an API call to CloudTrail. CloudTrail is going to publish that to CloudWatch logs. Something called CloudWatch events, which is the filter, is going to pick that up and then shoot that over to SNS, and that's going to email us with a notice that a user was created in the environment. All this automation is going to reduce those manual processes, okay? And that's going to reduce your risk. The less time you have to spend doing any manual things, right, your risk level is going to go down. But you do have to remember, right, that you need to provide some oversight and monitoring of that of these processes to make sure they're working as designed. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's not just set it and forget it. It's you have to go back and look at these things occasionally to make sure they're working as designed. All right, so let's do this. All right, so the first thing we have to do in this, and these slides will be available after the presentation, so you can try this yourself, of course. We need to build out like this baseline. So the first thing we're going to do is build out CloudTrail, right, and create a trail in that service. And then we're going to configure CloudWatch logs in the trail. And then we're going to configure SNS so we can get the email when things happen. The reason this is kind of the baseline is because we're going to use these services a couple times, okay, for the demo. And so this is like just the initial phase. So I'm going to go to the console. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. And we're going to create a trail, a cloud trail. So we're going to go here.
Hey, Hunter, you may need to share a different screen. We're still seeing your deck if you're intending the demo to be shown.
Stand by. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, yeah, let me do this. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. All right, how's that?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you for the heads up. Okay, so we're going to create the trail to start off, right? We'll call it demo baseline trail, all right? And we're gonna accept all the defaults. We're not gonna get into all this stuff. And we'll create a bucket, okay? And we'll call it demo baseline security event bucket, something like that. Hopefully that's not taken. We're not going to put any encryption or anything on it. Okay, we're not going to do that. But we are going to add a tag, and this goes back to the data classification, right? And the asset inventory. So make sure that you get in the habit of adding tags to all your resources in AWS. It's really important. It's a good habit to have. Okay. All right, so we have the trail created. Now, in order to connect CloudTrail with CloudWatch, you need to come down here. You can't do it on the initial build or setup. You have to come back and configure this after you create the trail. But you can configure CloudWatch logs to monitor your trail logs and notify you when specific activity occurs. Okay, so we're going to configure this. And we'll just call it, let's see here, we'll call it demo baseline AWS Midwest. Okay. All right. And that's going to ask us to use a role for CloudWatch logs, and we're just gonna, we can look at this here. I think it's create log stream and put log events. Yes. Okay. So we'll allow that, and that is going to be here. Okay. So that is done. All right, so the next step, if we go back to the slides, we're going, so we've completed step 1A, and we're gonna go back and do step 2 and 2A, okay? And that's going to simple notification service, and we're gonna create a topic. And we'll click on create topic, and we'll call it demo baseline topic. And just the defaults is fine, okay? And then we're gonna create a subscription, okay? And I'm going to type in, oops, sorry, email. I'm going to put in my demo, demo at gmail.com. Okay, so I'm going to create a subscription. So when we get, when an event or an activity occurs in our environment, we're going to get some kind of notice at that mailbox. So the mailbox, if we go to that, right now it is asking us to confirm the subscription, okay? So that's standard process. So we go back here, it's saying, let's see here, I believe if we go to subscriptions, it says pending confirmation, okay? So we'll go back to that and we'll confirm the subscription. Okay, and now it's confirmed and we have our mailbox set up. All right, so we'll delete this one. And then we're gonna go here and refresh this, and it should say it's been confirmed. Okay, so it's confirmed. All right, so if we go now to here, we are done with everything on this page. So we've got the baseline configuration set up, And this is something we can use over and over again for for any services, and you can do the same thing in your environments. All right, so now we're gonna get into the kind of the meat of it, and the thing we want to do is when we create a user, right, we're going to use a keyword that's going to be thrown from the CloudTrail API at CloudWatch event, and it's going to trigger the action, which is going to be getting an email from CloudWatch events that says a new user was created in your AWS cloud environment. So we're going to go to CloudWatch, and then we're going to go down to Events Rules, and we're going to click on Create Rule. And we are going to select IAM. Okay. And we are going to, we don't want all events because we don't want to be notified about everything, but we do want to know when a user is created. So you can see the event pattern down here. It adds the event name create user. So anytime that's created within CloudTrail, because you actually add a user in IAM, it's going to react. Okay. And then we're going to send that to the SNS topic we just created. Okay. So we will call this, let's see, IAM demo create. Okay. So we're going to create the rule. Okay. So that's all set. All right. So now, if we go to users and we go to add user, we'll do test demo user. We'll just give this person programmatic access and no permissions, and we'll do environment test. Okay, and we will review it, and then we will create the user. So you can see here the user's been created, and I go here, and yes, there it is. Okay. So if I go back to my mail, I should get a notice that it was created. These are the risks of doing live demos. Oh, this was slow this week. I'm just going to check this really quick. And you can go back and you can edit. Create user. Okay. Let's see, try it again. No. All right. Well, that's too bad. We will move on to the next one. And the next rule we're going to create, and I'll come back to that. It might show up because there has been a little bit a lag this week, is to create a rule for EC2. Okay. And EC2 is obviously is going to have a number of options associated with it. So we're going to track anytime the EC2 instance is stopped, we're going to get a notification for any instance, not specific instances, although you can target that. And we're going to get a notification about that. Let's see if this does any better. Okay. EC2 demo stuff. Okay. All right, so now let's go to, let me see here. EC2, we have a host running, so let's go to instance state and stop. And we will stop it. And while that's doing that, let's go back and just check the mail really quick. Still not showing up. One thing I did see in my test this week is that sometimes the first one it takes. Let's try it again. We'll do demo test user 2. And say environment test. And we'll review it and we'll create the user. Okay. Oops. Nothing. Let me check the Email, why is that going? All right, well, let's see, that's interesting. That's late plans, right? All right, so I'd have to troubleshoot that a little more, and I'm not gonna run out of time if I do that. So we'll go to the next one. Before I do that though, I want to, one of the tests I'm going to implement is going to be for testing bucket encryption and verifying that it's enabled. I'm not going to build that out manually, however. I'm going to simply create a CloudFormation stack that's going to build out that environment for us. So we'll call this demo S3 encryption. Okay. All right. We can add a tag here. Okay. And we'll build this out. Okay, and that's going to get going. Okay, so that's building out. Let's do the third demo, which is, so this one, I don't know why that didn't work. It's a good one. I'll have to go back and look. So demo 2 is re-enabling CloudTrail logging if it's disabled. All right, so I've already created some of this just to expedite things. So what's happening here is we're going to create a custom role in IAM, and it's going to have policies for CloudWatch and for CloudTrail, okay? So we can turn it back on. And then we're going to, I've already built out the function in Lambda, and it's going to use the custom role that we created here. And then we're going to create a CloudWatch event rule that is going to look for a stop logging event in CloudTrail. And then it's going to run the Lambda function, and maybe we'll get an SMS email for that one. So those are the steps here. So custom role, that's what this looks like here. Let's go to roles. Okay. And I've got the permissions I outlined on the slide. Okay. And then we're going to go into Lambda. And the Lambda configuration has some code I found on the internet. It's going to basically look for any stop logging event, and then it's going to restart logging in CloudTrail. Okay. And the permissions here, you can see we have the role assigned, and that the function has permissions to access CloudTrail to re-enable it. Okay. It's a little bit broad, but for the purposes of the demonstration, it's pretty sufficient. Okay, so now the last step is to go into the CloudWatch event rule and configure that event rule to stop logging. So let's do that next. Let's go back to here. Is there anything yet? Okay. Interesting. Okay, so let's go here and refresh. And we can see here S3 enable encryption is something that was built out with that CloudFormation script. So we'll run that as demo 3. But for now, we're going to create another rule. And this rule is going to be for CloudTrail and for stop logging. So we're going to type in CloudTrail. Okay. And we're going to get information from CloudTrail. And this may be the problem. That may be the issue. Maybe I missed a setting on that. Stop logging. It's going to be the operation we're looking for. And instead of just adding SNS this time, we're going to add the Lambda function, right? Which we just looked at. And then we're going to go to SNS and add the topic for SNS. So we get an email, hopefully. And then we'll call this CloudTrail demo re-enable. Okay. Automatically re-enable CloudTrail. Okay. We're going to create that rule. Okay. let me go back just really quick and double check this. Figure right. It's interesting. All right. Okay. So now we are going to test CloudTrail, and we're going to disable it. Now there is a little bit of a delay with this typically, so we're going to shut it down. And then re-enable it. I'm sorry, not do that. I'm going to shut it down. And then I'm going to refresh the screen. And you can see there, it's automatically re-enabled. So in this case, it worked. Let's see if we get the notification on this. Maybe it's no. Oh, there it is. Okay. There it is. So in this case, stop logging is the event, and it did pick it up. I'm not sure why AAM's not coming through, but we'll maybe go back and look at that if we have a few more minutes. But in this case, the rule we set up, right, the event-driven security process we configured here to re-enable CloudTrail when it's disabled did work. So say you're a security admin and you need to know exactly when that's CloudTrail or any audit logging is disabled. This process here would give you the notification, and then you could take action on it, right? This is maybe where you want to have good incident management. So you're like, okay, what's going on? But, okay, you get the notice, but you also know, because you have implemented the event-driven security to re-enable your audit trail, you know you're not being exposed in terms of not having the right forensics or logging data to go back and look and see what happened, excuse me, in your environment. So that's really key, because if someone's shutting that down, right, you're going to be left, with nothing and really not going to be able to identify what happened in your environment. Okay. All right. So that's pretty cool. So the last one is enabling encryption on a bucket. All right. So what this is going to do, the use case for this is demo 3. And this was all configured in CloudFormation, right? So we threw it out there, and we created the function, and the function's it's going to use a custom role, right? And it's going to have we're going to set the trigger for CloudWatch events, or it's already been set up rather. And then when the encryption on a bucket is disabled, we're going to have a Lambda function be notified by that CloudWatch event rule, and it's going to re-enable encryption on that bucket. So let's go out to S3 and refresh. And we will go here to our CloudTrail bucket, and we're going to go ahead and enable server-side encryption, Amazon's managed with Amazon managed keys. We're going to click on save. So let's refresh it so you can see that it is enabled. Okay, so that bucket that we created for all the logging, right, is now encrypted. All right, so now I'm going to go back into it, and wrong button. Now I'm going to go back into it and disable it. Okay, I'm going to click on none, click on save. Okay. And I'm going to click on this. Okay, it turns it back on right away. All right, so in this case, if this use case, if you have somebody who's trying to disable encryption on a bucket, and that's an absolute, mandatory requirement that encryption be enabled on that bucket because of the type of data that's stored in it, then you can implement this type of event-driven security to re-enable the encryption without you having to monitor anything. It's going to happen automatically. So I disabled it. I go back and refresh, and it's enabled. So there are some good use cases here. And like I said, the amount of things you can do is virtually unlimited. All right. If you can code it, pretty much you can configure it. And I know some of you are commenting out here, so let me see if Okay. So if you know, if it's codable, you can probably create some rules around it, and then create that event-driven security to really help you know, monitor your environment and then remediate issues as they develop. Let's go back to the mailbox really quick, see if we got any more messages here. No. What? I am kind of curious. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. I just want to look really quick, you guys, because it's kind of interesting. This isn't working. I want to test one more. I want to do one more user. Create user. Okay. Yeah, the SMS topic community. I do know one thing, everyone. If you're doing this from Ohio, you cannot, in certain regions, it's not going to be supported. So just keep that in mind. Depending on where you're building this from, it may not be supported if you're not in specific regions like US East 1. It did not work in Ohio. I do know that. All right, let me just try it one more time just to see. And then we'll get to the end, and that'll be it. Demo test 3. User. Okay. Kind of stinks when it doesn't work as you planned, but that's all right. I didn't get the blue screen of death like Bill Gates that time. That's good. Poor guy. All right, let's see. Here we go. So there it is right there. Now I have to go back and study why that didn't work. So I don't know. That's an interesting one. Maybe there's some lag, or there's a queue at Amazon. I got the other ones on time, so I don't know. But anyway, so this would be another use case, right, with the users, in that, okay, I need to know when a user's created. I want to make sure that you know, only people who have a business justification with, you know, secondary or tertiary approvals have gone through the process of being set up right, and I need to know when that happens. And then, you know, from an audit perspective, auditors would like this, depending on, you know, how it matches your policies and what your oversight looks like in your overall control structure. But you know, it's always nice to demonstrate that, you know, this is how we are proactively monitoring things as they occur in the environment. This wasn't the best example because it took a few minutes, but nevertheless, you know, you can demonstrate here that I did get a notice, and if there's other things you have to do to follow up on that, you can do it at this time because you would have that notification. So that's event-driven security in a nutshell. It's really easy. I encourage you to test it out, throw it up in throw it out in your lab, you know, see if you can, you know, build out a few of these, and then, you know, build a business case for your organization if you think this is something that would help. And if you need help doing this, of course, when I do the demo for you, I know it's going to work. Unlike my couple of the snafus today, but I think, you know, this is a decent tool to really help you know, get to that next level on the cloud for security, and be more proactive about how you monitor and, you know, and then follow through with, say, remediation, or you know, trying to eliminate some of those risks that may be pervasive in your environment. Okay. All right. So,
Stuff, Hunter.
yeah. Hey, you're welcome. Let me just let me finish a couple things here.
Yeah, great.
So the last thing is around these security certs. I know you guys talked about this earlier. These are the things I read. The items in red are the ones I spent a lot of time on because they came up a lot in the exam. Okay. But these 3 white papers are really good, and I can't emphasize enough reading about KMS. KMS cryptographic details, though, I did not read that as much, so that's grayed out. But these other ones are things that can help you in the exam. And then I did read the developer guides. I heard part of the talk with the presenter earlier on some of the certs, and I didn't read these like end to end, but unfortunately I did read these 2 end to end, and this one's like 1,300 pages, so it's not very pleasant, but there's a lot of information there. And if you become this ninja over here, you know, that Bridget Johnson talks about, policy, it's one of her presentations about being a policy, I am ninja, right? You can really be effective with your company because, like I talked about, IAM is just a weakness we see in general across the board, and where we spend a lot of time helping our customers. And when we, to do that, you just have to have that inside detailed knowledge of it. I would recommend the FAQs as well. And then here's some other helpful links. There's the Open Guide to AWS, which you guys probably mostly know about, and then the Architecture Center. And like I said, get in the lab and try it and see what happens. And then here's my contact info if you need to reach me. And it's good speaking to everyone. Sorry about this small snag there with the demo, but it's one of those risks you take. And but hopefully you got the gist of it, and you did see the one at the end come through, so that was good. So thanks for the time. And any questions?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please place those either in the Q&A or in the chat. Hunter, I believe that is literally the definition of a demo. When you do something, especially in something like this, it's always when something flakes out.
Yeah, that's right. It's okay.
I said in the chat, though, it's really great to hear that other people talk through each step out loud.
Yeah.
And that it's not just me, so.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, great. Does anybody have any questions? We've got about 4 minutes here.
And hit me up on LinkedIn if you don't, or email me, and happy to talk about it separately. And we're doing a lot of things in Onyx right now. We're building out a security practice since I joined, and it's a lot of fun. And we have some really cool things from a audit perspective, audit and assessment perspective.
We do have a question for you here. This comes from Caleb. Is there a low end of organization skill / complexity where you've seen the where you've seen the overheard of the assessment / process struggles to provide enough value?
Can you repeat that again? Is it in the chat? Let me see.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, Caleb, if you're able to pull yourself off of mute, maybe you could just ask the question out loud.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. I think, if I understand this right, Caleb, it's good to meet you, by the way, is I think there's not any specific organization size or scale where we see problems. We see them everywhere. It can be a large organization, it can be a smaller organization. It's just, I think there's so much urgency and need to get into the cloud. Some of these things become afterthoughts, and so there's not enough time spent up front trying to plan some of this out to make sure it's really meeting the requirements. And then, IAM is complicated. It's not an easy thing to put together. And when you think about it in terms of the broader governance of what you need to do in terms of managing the cloud, you have to think very strategically about it. So we're starting to help customers more and more with things like Control Tower, using AWS organizations, and building out, say, like landing zones, for example, that help them overall, be more efficient and better with compliance, risk management, and this overall governance, so that they're not, is reactive to things. They're being more strategic and a little bit less reactive. We see a lot of that, actually. It's a big market right now for us.
I think your microphone. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go for it.
Mostly does address like a large part of my question. And for enterprises, like obviously, like yes, spend the time, spend the money. But when we sort of like at the very, very far end, there's like just like the one guy who has a website, right? He can probably understand like his threat like level, but then you get to like a small, medium business sort of area. I find people struggle to want to invest in doing like the assessment.
Right.
And I don't know how to position like the value of doing all of this work ahead of time.
Well, I think the value is, if you build it right up front. I mean, the flexibility of the cloud, right, allows you to go back and change it if you need to change it, right? A lot easier than, say, on-prem. But the value in getting it right up front is that even for smaller organizations, is that if you do build, right, you get acquired, your company grows, you're already in a good position to continue building, as opposed to going back and trying to fix things that you didn't think out. I agree that if you just have a few things, you're not going to spend a lot of time on it. You're right, it's days long, Caleb. But it's I think it's something that if you just spend a little bit of time on it early, you'll be glad you did.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Hunter, appreciate the talk.